Meet George Birch, the founder and CEO of Oyster Heaven, a company that is
like a cleaning company, except we clean the ocean and we use oysters to do the cleaning.
Sorry, what?
Oysters are the most efficient filtering system known to humanity. They filter liters of water a day. A healthy ocean is as valuable to society as medicines that cure you from diseases.
Well, hello guys, and welcome to this new episode of Ecosystemic. Today we will talk about oysters. And don't worry, Ecosystemic is not yet a food channel. So our guest will walk us through the importance of oysters for reef conservation coastal. Is that correct? Coastal?
Coastal?
Yes. So because I pronounce it in French, so that's why
Yeah.
you have some words that you are used to use in your mother language and never use them in
Yeah.
other languages, and then you're stuck. So welcome George, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
When I read your name, well, actually your business name, not your name. I thought like Oyster Heaven. Is it like heaven for oysters or for us? you know.
Yeah, it's a funny one. There's a few different reasons why we ended up with this name for the company. Part of it is a bit of a rebellion against some of the naming conventions that I think a lot of organizations have out there. And I don't want to name names, but there are just a lot of organizations that sort of sound very straight and professional, like regenerate the planet. And I have personally have a tough time remembering the differences between them. So I wanted something which would be easier to remember. And so Oyster Heaven came up because my friend has a band called Babe Heaven, and I thought that was quite a funny name. And it became Oyster Heaven. Yeah. But yeah, heaven for oysters, heaven for the ocean, something along those lines.
And do you plan to have also a music band, Oyster Heaven?
Maybe at a later stage. I do quite like music, but I don't know if these are going to come together in the near future yet.
Well, it depends. I think that would make like a very cool band name.
Yeah, potentially. Maybe quite confusing.
So let's go back to the real Oyster Heaven. And can you like give a sneak peek to our viewers and listeners on who are like Oyster Heaven and what you do for a living?
Yeah. So the way that I describe it to people is I say we're kind of like a cleaning company, except we clean the ocean and we use oysters to do the cleaning, and then we sell cleaning contracts to multinationals or governments. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, and it's not just cleaning that we do. But if you talk about oysters, people always think either one, you're going to eat them at some point, which is not what we do, or two, it's for charity or sort of conservation purposes. And that's also not quite what we do either. And I think the idea behind it or the motivation behind it was born from my work in the charity space. And although many organizations do incredible work, groundbreaking, pioneering things, Unfortunately, we live in this capitalist system. And if you want to compete against other participants in this capitalist system, you need to play by the rules of capitalism. So we needed to find a way to make restoration, building oyster reefs, a profitable exercise so that we can get it to scale and we can make regeneration something which is equally attractive, if not more attractive, to invest in as commercial fishing, for example.
But why oysters? Like, is it well the project was, or the company was born out of your need to find a suitable solution to clean the oceans, and then you went to oysters and thought that, oh, that's a viable solution? Or did you have any knowledge upfront, knowing that, okay, I I don't know, like, what's the backstory?
Yeah. So, having worked in this charity space and having become quite frustrated about how slow things moved, how little money was available, I went and worked in the asset management industry. So, an organization that was managing pension funds, it was called Henderson, and then it became Janus Henderson. And I was there on a team of two people that became a few later on at the mainstreaming of ESG, environmental social governance, responsible investment. It was just starting to take off. And I spent a lot of time there trying to understand, amongst other things, what was stopping the manager of a multi-billion-dollar teachers pension fund from investing in the oceans. Why was he or she investing in a pharmaceutical company or a fossil fuels company, but not investing in oyster reefs? Because for me, my background in marine ecology and biology, I can see why a healthy ocean is as valuable to society as medicines that cure you from diseases, because our oceans are providing food and sustenance and clean air, and we need all of those things just as much as we need cold medicine. So the three reasons that prevented a fund manager from investing in the ocean was, firstly, it needs to be a big project. It needs to be a big ticket size. They need to be able to invest in something where the ticket size is at least 100 million euros. And if not, then they have got all sorts of constraints with their ability to invest. They can't invest in small companies. Secondly, it needs to be professional. It needs to be standardized and de-risked, a liquid market, consistent, predictable. And restoration generally already doesn't do very well on these two criteria. There are not very large projects, and when the projects do exist, they're a bit of a mess. They're quite sort of pilot prototypey. And then thirdly, you need to deliver a return, and not just a return, but one that on a risk adjusted basis is better than something they're already invested in. Because you want to say, don't invest in the pharmaceutical company, you should be investing in us instead. And we will give you more money at less risk, or the same amount of money at less risk. It's got to be some sort of improvement. And if you can do these three things, then it almost doesn't matter what the investment is, you've got a good chance of them being interested. So for me at that point, because my dream when I left university was, okay, I'm going to go and start fixing the oceans. And what I wanted to do was unblock the the walls between this institutional money and the ocean. And I started to understand the shape of the problem. So then I started to think, okay, what types of systems, what types of species, what kind of interventions can we make that fits these criteria? And I got interested in oysters, not particularly because I knew anything about them, but someone told me at one point, and I don't remember who it is, which is really sad, that BAE Systems says oysters are the most efficient filtering system known to humanity. And they filter 200 liters of water a day. Now, BAE Systems never said that. Can't find that quote. They do filter 200 liters of water a day, but it stuck with me. And I started realizing, okay, wow, if they do these incredible filtration jobs, why are we eating them? Should we not be selling them as water filtration devices or something? And then I found out not only do they do a good job on water filtration, but they provide incredible marine habitat. So just like coral reefs produce all sorts of incredible diversity in life, oyster reefs also do the same thing. And not just for species of sort of philosophical importance, but ones that end up on our plate, like the prey for cods and haddock and herring, lobster, crab, eel, all sorts of different things. And they also used to form this incredible concrete surface, concrete mat along our coastlines, which was preventing coastal erosion. And we spend billions and billions each year stopping our countries falling into the ocean because we're losing, sands too quickly. And this is a very modern phenomenon. So my idea was, okay, we can use these features of oysters. We're missing about 20% of the North Sea used to be oyster reefs before we ate them to extinction. So we're missing a lot of them. They are a very uniform currency, so it's a big problem that you can easily throw 100 million euros at. It's a pretty uniform currency, so you can just put more and more and more oysters in, same thing, so standardized. And then because of these incredible jobs they do, which our society is willing to pay for today, we think you can deliver this return. Well, we know you can. We've been doing it.
Yeah, and that's not what I had in mind when your name was suggested by Laura from the team, and she suggested your name for the interview, suggested the company's name, and my first impression was, okay, maybe they farm oysters and they sell them like organic oysters and then when she told me no, they are not like an organic farm fishing or like oyster farm or whatever. Have a look, it's like asset management, carbon credit, etc. And I thought okay, is it for real? And I went on your website, did some research, and I realized, oh man, I couldn't be that wrong. Your oysters never end up in a plate, right?
Not the ones that we put in, but we work with fishing communities, coastal communities, to put our reefs into the water. What we want to do is we want to set up these brood stocks which start spewing out more and more oysters. They're just having more and more children. So that one day, if you get to a point where we've got really healthy oyster populations again, it can become part of the species that they fish for, but not the ones that we're putting in directly on our reefs. No.
Yeah, so if oysters are listening to this episode, they should definitely apply to join your oyster group. That's for real, like the oysters heaven. They will never be eaten. They will live a long and healthy and happy life. That's perfect for them. And yeah, and I fully get the financial structure of your business model, but how do people perceive it when you pitch this to your potential clients? How do they perceive it? Do they get it immediately, or are they skeptical? What's the first impression?
We have a lot of baggage that we have to deal with as an organization because people are just very triggered by what they think they already know about either oysters or carbon markets or biodiversity markets or restoration. So initially, you spend some time moving away from some of the things that they're expecting, or addressing some of the things they're expecting and say, hey, we're not this. What we're trying to focus on as an organization is not sustainability in its classic form that has been emerging in the 2010s and 2020s. Not ESG. We don't sell carbon credits. We don't sell biodiversity credits. And this is because a lot of the organizations or investors we speak to, rightly, are a bit suspicious of ESG carbon credits. People have got a bad taste because of some of the things that have been happening in the markets. Biodiversity credits don't exist yet. And so if you're coming and, there are a lot of organizations which will be coming to investors and saying, yeah, we're going to sell biodiversity credits. And they say, well, no one's selling biodiversity credits yet. That's not a real thing. No one knows how to do it. And organizations also, you say, oh, hello, supermarket, do you want to buy some biodiversity credits? And they go like, yeah, we're not ready for that. Or you'll get sent to someone in the CSR department who they might have a small budget to look into that kind of thing. What we want to work with is about organizational resilience, particularly looking at supply chain resilience. And we think that there are sort of three forms of generalized form of operational and supply chain resilience for a few industries that we work with. So we're very interested in organizations that either source ingredients from the ocean. So whether it's fish for eating, pet food, supermarkets, aquaculture, organizations in industries that have a compliance requirement to keep various coastal qualities at a good standard. So, for example, water utilities, they are repeatedly getting fined for serious sewage incidents or water quality issues, bathing, like they'll have bathing water quality and closures as a result of them. And then also organizations which have tricky issues with their social license to operate, and that kind of compounds environmental issues as well. So every organization has a social permission to exist, and particularly if you need a new license. So maybe, for example, you're looking at a marina and they're trying to get a license to extend the marina, but the local society is like, no, actually, we're going to really hold this up unless you're working with us on some sort of mitigation project. So this means that instead of speaking to the CSR department, we're trying to speak to we're trying to speak to individuals such as CFOs, CIOs. CFOs and CIOs have been busy investing in the quality of their supply chains for as long as CIOs and CFOs have existed. And I think a really good analogy of this is I would highlight, for example, Nestle's practices, which have been going on for decades with their Nespresso brand. Nestle doesn't own any coffee farms, but they send enormous amounts of effort, money, knowledge towards that extended supply chain to ensure that the quality of their coffee remains high, to ensure that the availability remains constant, to ensure that the price is not exploding for unknown reasons as a result of climate change or political issues, for example. So this is just what we're doing is essentially the same thing for the ocean. It's just recognizing that just as on land, an organization's responsibilities don't end, where their processing facilities are. We also shouldn't end the responsibility on our coastlines, and it goes out further into the water. So just to sort of summarize this, I think we really stay away from, we are here to support the transition to a sustainable ecology. Our mission is more oysters in the water and for all the beautiful things that causes. But the way that we sell and interact and create a persona for the marketplace is really about organizational resilience. How can we ensure that people can still supply their ingredients or products 20 years in the future for a reasonable price?
I see. But what's hard for me to figure out is, I totally see, like, it makes sense for like any big industry that works, like, anywhere near the ocean, like fishing or whatever, is interested by having a healthy ocean, like, just like sorry to use this analogy, but just as tobacco industry is interested by having healthy smokers. They are not, if they could get rid of cancer, they would do it overnight, because they don't want people to die out of. And I understand, but what you are offering is somehow a common good. So two questions came to my mind. Like, the first, it's there are no direct causality between your action and their benefit. Like, they come to share this benefit with others. So how do you show them, like, clearly that there is a fit? And second, like, how do you price it? How do you put a price on this?
And this kind of, I think you were insinuating about greenwashing and this idea that organizations will, through our actions, be allowed to continue causing damage or causing issues in the marine environment.
Oh, no. Like, that was not my.
I know there's another part of this question as well, but I think it's worth addressing this because this is also something that we must get asked a lot. And then the second part of this is the free rider problem, right? How do you ensure that the organizations are actually enjoying the benefits that we're generating? So I think they're kind of linked, or they can be kind of linked. Amazingly, we are at the advent of human technology, where we have these digital AI, machine learning. I'm going to use these buzzwords now because it's not me that's the expert on this kind of thing, but I have colleagues that are. We're at the advent of this era where we're able to get increasingly unbelievable resolution into the movement behaviors of all sorts of different species, geological characteristics. We can look at larvae particle migration across areas of the North Sea. We can use satellite imagery to look at algal blooms, for example. We can also start using these same models to input shipping movement, fishing zones, local legal issues, social context. And so you can create these digital twins which start to give you a much better understanding of what the outcomes might be from your intervention and how they're relevant to the value of your organization. There's this amazing characteristic of nature restoration, which is that the cost to restore your hectares of oyster reef is so dramatically lower than the value that it generates. And I'm not talking about some sort of like esoteric societal value. I'm talking about value that you can directly attribute to an organization. So maybe I can explain a case study and how we would go about a sales process or like a negotiation. So what we would do is an organization might come to us and they say, hey, we've got this issue, supply chain resilience issue, and we source fish and ingredients. As part of our ingredients, we're worried that there's not going to be enough. haddock, cod, something like that, left in the ocean. And we're also worried that our cereal and dairy footprint is going to start getting regulated because of nitrogen and phosphate emissions. And we've also got some local farming which keeps on getting seawater encroachment. And so we can say, okay, tell us where these farms are, what the issue is, where you're doing your fishing, and we can say, right, we should use our technology, our digital twin. We say we think the best place to put them is here. And based on this specific circumstance, we say, right, we're going to generate a lot of biodiversity, but we know that you don't care about a lot of biodiversity. You care about the 6 species that end up in your food, that end up in your products. So what is not biodiversity, but it is what is the value of the additional cod fillets and the additional haddock fillets that are going to end up in your supply chain. And then we say, okay, we're going to manage this amount of nitrogen and phosphate in these areas, and we know that a lot of your farms are there and going to be emitting nitrogen, and we can see that regulation is coming. And also, we can build these reefs, and it might help reduce wave tidal surges, for example. Now, what the organization will do, they'll come back to us and they'll say something like, oh, we'll say, and so our 5-hectare project is going to generate 24 million euros worth of value, and all linked to these prices which can be traded today. And they'll say, well, we're not actually going to catch all these fish because, we don't have enough boats, and that's not how it works. And actually, we don't own the fishing boats, and it's really just about availability of supply. And actually, we're not really regulated for nitrogen yet. So, yeah, we'd like a discount, please, basically. And we say, yeah, sure, you can have a discount, of course. And you can work out, basically, saying, we would like a discount from the value. And at some point, there is our break even. And as long as the fair value is somewhere in between the break even and the total value that we see, then everyone's walking away with happy, because the client is getting a big discount and we're getting a margin. And then the free rider problem comes in here. So the value that the organization captures is, somewhere here, right? They're going to catch X percentage of the fish, and the nitrogen may or may not be useful. But the remaining 80-90% of additional species, of additional management, carbon sequestration, all these other things that they don't really care about, gets donated directly to nature. It's all regenerative. Someone else can have it. And this is a secondary, very interesting part of the narrative that an organization might want to generate around it. This is not, okay, we're going to net off the bad things we've done. This is about, we're going to invest, and we're going to be generating 10 times the value and donate it straight to society. Now, the failure would be is if it was only going to be one organization that did this, because then everyone would just be free riding from what they've done. What we hope is that the first few projects that we're doing start looking really good. We're really able to demonstrate how this is valuable not only to the businesses, but for society and everyone else, so that we can start attracting a lot more investments into these types of projects, getting lovely public-private partnerships. And then what you can do is layer different industries on top of each other. So you say, okay, you've got a supermarket that's particularly interested in the marine protein. You've got a water utility that's particularly interested in the water quality. And you've got a local property company that wants to make sure that their property portfolio is still, the insurance is still affordable. And then you have the local government that says, great, we want to support all the new jobs that are coming into it. So you've got potentially four different industries on one project, all enjoying different benefits with different dependencies. So even if one element of it starts to not work, you can still make sure you're getting revenues from another industry or with the other organization. So you've got these units. And then if you repeat this 40 times around the North Sea, you've got something which is quite exciting to a pension fund to invest in.
Yeah. It's time for a little self-promotion and introducing our new product. So, this show was brought to you by Zero, the last portable battery you will ever need. Zero is not only sustainable,
and repairable with no tools, it's also modular to fit your needs and your way of consuming energy. With Zero, you can add a flashlight, a tripod, more outputs, you name it. We have 20 plus add-ons and 20 plus color combinations. You can have it in all white, wood, glow and dark, or any other color to fit your personality and what you would like to have as a battery. Zero is not only a portable battery, it's a movement. By supporting Zero, you support your right for a more sustainable and responsible tech with repairable designs and products that are built to last as they are meant to be. To support us and get yours, you can go on nomorezero.com or go.nomorezero.com if you want to know more about the product. Don't forget, go.nomorezero.com.
Well, first I see that you are selling on something really tangible and not some like black magic bullshit where you say, hey, as you said, like biodiversity credit, etc. But here it's like the potential client or user of the benefits can already have like a projection of the net added value to his activity through yours. And if it happened that I catch, a cod while fishing, nobody will come to me and say, "Hey, that's my cod. I paid for it. Like, put it back in the sea."
Yeah. 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 It's about enhancing a common good, and there are all sorts of difficulties with this. But I would also argue that, if as a society or as a cluster of countries around the North Sea, we can't start agreeing with how to maintain and value this immense common good, we're in a lot of trouble. So I think this type of behavior where it's not just every boat or every country for itself, we've got much bigger problems if that continues than just the population of the oysters.
Before we get into like the oysters as animals, there's something I really like about your business is that it's designed to be a business. It's designed to be financially viable. It's very innovative. It's very sophisticated as a business structure, and it's designed to be viable. And and I didn't mean when I talked about tobacco, I didn't mean like a greenwashing, but true. Like I saw like many companies with the sole business model of, hey, pay us. We're doing good. We're saving the planet. Please pay us. And at the end it became somehow like a meme. It became like a masquerade of SaaS companies planting trees every time you take a subscription. And I hate these kind of business models because I can go outside and plant my own tree. Yeah. I'm not waiting for somebody to do it on my behalf, where your business, both the conservation and like the common good and the financial viability are embedded in the DNA since day one. Like I can clearly see, okay, what's the impact on us as human beings and the ecosystem, and why somebody would pay for it. And it makes sense in both cases. Was it like your first, the initial draft of your business was like this, or did you had to iterate and make many pivots before getting to this like refined version?
I say this couple of lines, which I think summarizes the view that I've had for a very long time. So I say to people, nature is the most persistently and seriously mispriced asset ever. And if we've got any chance of averting this environmental catastrophe, not only do we need a huge suite of technology to help us, but we've also, as a society, got to start recognizing that trees are not just worth the timber that they're made of, or an oyster isn't just worth the meat that it's made of, but actually they are these incredible, subtle, regenerative, organic machines that are providing vital services to society for free. As a society, we are starting to recognize that. And there is all these sort of pieces of regulation emerging, and I'm totally ambivalent about what they are. Because what I know is that oysters and a few other things as well are going to be enjoying this price correction over the next 10, 20 years as an asset. As we start realizing that they are going to help fix our society. And so if you can become an organization that either, that provides technology to install oyster reefs at low cost, enormous scale in a sustainable way, you'll be rewarded for it somehow. So we're not the recognition or the idea, the basis of this was that people have there's an amazing natural technology out there in so many different forms, and I have this vision in my head that there's going to be this new industry, this new type of industry, nature as infrastructure or something. So groups that are just amazing at restoring nature, amazing at fixing the carnage that we've been doing over the last 100 years. And I look out, I'm based in Rotterdam, and Rotterdam's the biggest port in Europe and has got this insane chemical refinery hardware out there. And I just look at it and I say, okay, in 30 years' time, hopefully we're not going to need this anymore. So what can we be using this for? How does this move into something else? We've got this, the most exceptional oyster hatcheries in Europe are pretty small. They don't get a lot of investment at the moment. But you look at things like iPhone factories, and just the amount of automation and excellence and precision that you can use, and we're just at the earliest possible stages of how well we can do this. So I think this has been driven by this sort of larger fantasy, and I think that this fantasy is applicable to so many different concepts, whether it's seaweed or seagrass, or I think similar business models probably exist with beavers or reforestation, whatever you like. Oysters, I think, it seemed obvious to me at the time because there used to be a lot of them, and they're not getting a huge amount of love at the moment. But there's been lots of pivoting in terms of the way that we tell our story, the way that we express value, that we make a sale. But the fundamental of it is oysters put more fish in the ocean, they keep our water clean, they stop our homes falling into the ocean. And these three things people need. So we're going to sell these three things. And that's been the idea from the day one.
That's cool. I'm really impressed by this concept of nature as infrastructure. Actually, I interviewed another gentleman some weeks ago, building kind of artificial islands to clean the water bodies, like ponds, lakes, etc., based on plants and microbial cocktail, etc. And he got the same philosophy as you, and he explained to me how these floating islands brought a full ecosystem back, because for example, the birds that left because of human intervention came back to these islands as a safe haven. They put their eggs there, etc., and then they eat the fish etc., with the insects, etc., and the full food chain was restored within some months or some years. And for you, it's the same. You are using one missing, or not missing, but one component of the food chain that was harmed by our actions. You bring him or it, well, you bring it back to its natural habitat with the favorable conditions, and boom, the full machine starts working again as it was supposed to
be. There's this lovely characteristic about nature, marine nature as well, which is so this is idea of rewilding, where you do small interventions that have big domino effects. And the amazing thing about underwater is that there are no roads, there are no barriers. preventing movement of nature between places. On land, there's highways everywhere that are just cutting up nature and stopping things progressing. But underwater, everything is connected, and you can get migration happening, and things come back even faster underwater than they do on land. And on land, I mean, I used to be quite pessimistic about a lot of these things, but there's been just these incredible case studies of how fast regeneration works now, and I'm becoming an increasingly optimistic person about our chances.
We had a little community on WhatsApp, and I had 10 days ago like an argument with a person that was like overly pessimistic, like like we are doomed. It's too late. There's nothing we could do. It's hopeless. Thank you, goodbye. And my point of view is like if each of us could stop being pessimistic like one day per year and use this day for like a positive action, whatever it could be. Like we could change the world with this simple idea. Like stop complaining for a day, but take like 12 hours full of action.
Yeah.
No matter what it could be.
It would definitely do something. Yeah.
Exactly. Like with like these like almost like 9 billion people, if we could do this, well, including babies, like I will yeah, we could change many things. But now like when you explained at the beginning the oysters not being just like an expensive delicacy, but being also the ultimate water filter. And by the way, I like the part of the story where somebody told you this, but you don't know, you don't remember who it is. The story was like wrongly attributed to another.
Yeah.
But it's true.
BAE systems. Yeah.
But it's true, and it looks like like an epic tale of some kind. Like it appeared in a dream. You have this revelation, and it appeared to be true. But you also mentioned that the population decreased widely over time. Is it because of intensive fishing and mass consumption, or pollution, or everything at once?
One of my most horrifying facts, and I'm pretty sure of the numbers, but you can look it up. But in 1864, which was peak oyster harvest in Europe, a population of 2 million people in London ate something like 800 million oysters, like nearly a billion oysters, like 400 oysters per person per year on average. They were the most common form of marine protein, and we just ate them to extinction because they're just very easy to catch and open if you've got a knife. Now we continued fishing them and continued eating them until you go through a tipping point, essentially. And my background is part of it is in population ecology, which really looks at how the large groups and ecosystems work together and what are the stable states, and then how do you move something into a new stable state but maybe an unfavorable condition. And oysters, just like anchovies, don't do well when there's just a couple of them. For an anchovy school to be happy, you want, I don't know how many there are, like hundreds of thousands of them. And oysters, similarly, there's this magic number, this sort of idea of critical mass, where they say for a European native oyster, you want 100,000 sexually mature adults all in one close place, and then they'll all start having children. But if it's less than that number, then there's too much predation, there's not enough fertilization that's happening, the larvae don't make it. So to be really sure that we get this 100,000 sexually mature adults, we put in 4 million oysters, 4 million juveniles, because nature's pretty hardcore and a lot of oysters die before they reach sexual maturity. Not as many as that, so we're not going to reach the edge of that envelope, but we want to be really tolerant of potential loss. So once we got to this situation in the North Sea where there were few oysters and all quite spread apart, then there was an emergence of a disease called Bonamia, which really caused further problems with the oysters, the vulnerable remaining oysters. And then there's a further issue with probably some pollution issues as well. But the reality is oysters are very hardy. They have become resistant to banamia. They've become resistant to all sorts of pollution issues as well. So if you go to the port of Rotterdam, so native oysters are declared functionally extinct by the IUCN. They're a red list species in the North Sea. But in the port of Rotterdam, there are now quite a few native oysters, which shows that, if this is probably one of the most hardcore places for an oyster or anything living to exist, and they seem to be doing okay there. So for me, that's a big signal saying if we just leave them to it in large enough numbers, they'll probably be okay. But we'll see. There's going to be about 10 years before we see the kind of population explosions that I'm hoping are going to happen.
If I'm right, one every 400 baby oysters make it till maturity.
If you want some quick statistics, and again, I hope I get these right. So one mum, female adult oyster, has 1 million eggs when she's about 4 years old. About 500,000 of these become fertilized. About 25,000 of these become larvae and swim around, 25,000, and about 2,500 or so, or another 5% actually settle. And then I think about 17% of them will survive to adulthood. So you just get a smaller and smaller and smaller number. But just to put that in perspective, in the right conditions, if my maths was correct when I did this, an adult female oyster can have 50,000 surviving adult children over the course of a 20-year life. So they have a lot of children if they're the right places for them to go, and the fertilization can happen and the predation doesn't happen. But the potential for population explosions to happen is extraordinary. It's just, if you are one of the 500,000 larvae, you probably don't have a very high chance of having any children, fortunately.
Do they have other predators in like the food chain, or is it just us? Because when I think of oysters, like
lots.
Okay, because I think okay, they're pretty badass. Like they can, hide in the rocks, etc. They can, and I think okay, they may have like a long and happy life if we don't come and pick them out of water. But
the oysters, once they're big, very hard to. They're really robust. Nothing can really get them. There are a couple of things which will give it a go, particularly if they're loose. So if it's a loose oyster that's fallen off something, but if it's like attached to a rock and about that big, really nothing's getting in. It's when they're like this big that they're very vulnerable. And crabs really like them. Jellyfish get them when they're microscopic larvae. Birds get them. Whelks get them. There are all sorts of flatfish which get them. There are rays in America that get them. There's a whole bunch of predators for small oysters. There's a lot of things that would give them a go. But once they're big, so once you get to year 3, sometimes year 2, maybe only 5 to 10% of them will die per year. And that's good.
And is it correct to have like this analogy of oysters are somehow like the coral reefs of the North Sea?
Yeah. I say that quite a lot. I don't know if that's like super biologically correct, but I do say that. That's quite a good picture. Yeah.
No science behind my claim. Like like trolls will go and.
I think functionally they do a very similar. They form a very similar structure. So their oysters form this complex 3D structure that lots of other fish find very exciting, just like coral. in some ways, seagrass and seaweed and kelp does a similar thing, but it's much less of a strong structure, and it can disappear and move. So it's different. They're both great, but oysters and coral are very unique in terms of the hard 3D structures that they provide.
To get back to your business, for how long have you been doing this?
So I graduated from my MBA in 2021, and I didn't do very much for a few months. Was kind of thinking about what I wanted to do, and I was working on some. What I really didn't want to do was get back into the finance industry, but I had some people that wanted to talk to me about the finance industry, and I was finding it quite challenging to step away from it. But luckily, nothing materialized. And then I started thinking about this maybe in the end of 2021, and had a co-founder then who unfortunately left before we even incorporated. He thought it was all a bit risky. And then as I was having a bit of a panic about trying to raise money and having a bit of panic about, people always want you to have a co-founder. My first investor, Orange Wings, came into the picture. We'd been working with an organization, or I'd been working with an organization called Generous Minds to bring me on this sort of roadshow and put me in front of some investors. And Orange Wings, which is run by a lady called Sean Harris, who's terrific. Orange Wings is terrific. And they gave us our first seed money. So they invested 800,000 euros for 25% of the business. And then I was able to start, hiring people. So 2020, summer of 2022 was when we first started moving, I would say. Yeah. And now there are 9 of us full-time, 10 of us full-time, 9 of us based in Rotterdam, 1 of us based in our hatchery in Zeeland in the south of the Netherlands. But we're back and forth quite a lot. And then we have the majority of our work is subcontracted out. So we have a lot of partners, whether it's environmental bureaus or fishing communities that we work with to do the installation, or local agriculture. So I think probably about 60 to 70% of all the work that we do is subcontracted to trusted partners. Yeah.
You mentioned, I think, one of the biggest challenges clean tech companies have: fundraising. How was the experience for you? I think when I interview companies of similar stage, etc., 3 out of 4 bootstrapped, got grants, etc., and maybe 1 out of 4 went through this traditional way of finding institutional investors, etc. But at what stage were you when you closed your first funding round? Did you get there with a business that is already deploying solutions? Because yours is quite complex to deploy without funding. It's like creating an infrastructure, etc. I can't go there and say, hey, believe me, with my savings I deployed highways, etc. And now you can see them. Yeah.
So we'd won a small, I think there were a couple of things that made things easier at that first stage. The first one was the design of the artificial reef that we use. It's a lot on our website, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that this was a sort of big bit of our business, but the materiality of the artificial reef is not so significant. We don't sell reefs. We use them in our projects. we had the first designs, or I had the first designs of this reef at the time, and there were quite good reasons why we thought it was going to be very successful and low cost and was a bit of a game changer. And so being able to have a patent on that, and we were in a patent process, well, I was in a patent process for that. The second one was that we had our first customer already. It was a very good customer, and they were already in discussion with us, talking about some really large projects. So it wasn't there yet, but it was looking very promising, and we could sort of speak quite coherently about that. So the idea that revenue was on the horizon, and a pretty close horizon. The third thing was, I think, my background in asset management and finance gave a bit more security that I could speak the language of the right kinds of language for these people. I'd just been on an MBA. I'd spent 6 years in finance. And during that time, I'd gone and met with a lot of the companies that we wanted to be our customers. So I was already it wasn't, I had just come out of nowhere. I was quite well experienced for, I think, this kind of thing. And then finally, you can't understate the relationship that I have with Sean and Orange Wings. And at that stage, when it is just an individual, it matters so much that there's a good chemistry, and we wouldn't have gotten anywhere if that wasn't the case. And that that continues to this day. And so we're just about to finish our next funding round, and a combination of some equity. We've managed to raise some debt financing work to build the reefs, essentially to build these first 4 commercial reefs that we're in the process of installing. And it's essentially pension fund money, which is incredible. It will be teachers, firemen, nurses money who's going into building these oyster reefs. This is the story that we wanted. We're working with 3 amazing clients, and the full loop will be there. And I think it was the first stage was easier, I think. This stage has been tricky. This is the valley of death. This is demonstrating that it all works, and that conceptually you can get clients that are willing to sign contracts, that you can get the licenses to put your oysters in, that you can then get the right kind of financing to construct these projects. It's required a lot of sophistication and paperwork, and it's not been a fun process. But we're there. And we're waiting for there's one more document that needs to arrive at some point in the next couple of weeks, and then it'll all fall into place. And I'm not mentioning names and things at the moment because it's all going to come out in a press release. But maybe by the time this podcast comes out, you might see something, but maybe you have to wait a little bit longer.
Oh, that would be amazing. And to get back to what you said about this round is harder than the first one. Actually, it's funny because this is counterintuitive because people tend to think that your first funding round is the hardest one.
Mm-hmm.
And then after, when it's unlocked, things get easier, etc. But the more I interview people, the more this comes on the table again and again, like as you said. And I have a theory, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually the first funding round you sell on the vision. So the more you are passionate and convincing, you don't have any, you don't have a backlog, a history of what have been done previously. But the second round, people start to judge on the execution. So there's no more vision. You can say, "Oh, trust me, I underestimated the previous round, but this time, if you give me like 20 times more money, I will do what I said previously."
I think that's, yeah, I know what you mean. So yeah, we're definitely, everyone wants to know, okay, what are the results of your pilots? Like, are your licenses real? Are your patents real? Like, we want to see the contracts? We want to see all of these things. So, I mean, it's the right groups are out there to do this, but the process is just much longer. The first round of investment was, we spent many, many hours talking and going through it, but the due diligence that you can do on me as an individual is limited. I think what's really interesting for me, I think, is so my with my background in with the sort of institutional investment, sustainable investment, the very large scale organizations, these pension funds, is we've been speaking to these organizations for a long time. Some of them are my old colleagues, some of them are people that we've just been speaking to a little bit over the last few years, and I keep on asking them, okay, what do you need to see? What do you need to see from our organization for us to become interesting? What will take you to the level where suddenly we're in your targets? And I know now the people at the next stage, I know exactly who they're going to be. I know exactly what they want. And so when we go for the proper scale up round, I'm not concerned about making that happen at all. It's just no one wants to be the first risk capital bit. And you need super specialized people who really, they've just got it. And there's so many less investors at that stage, and there are even less investors for people on the themes that we're looking at the moment, because it's just such a new industry.
Would governments, cities, etc., be interested by oyster reefs that you are building as an infrastructure? I see like in many cities, they bring like huge rocks, throw them in water to avoid water level to raise, and I assume they pay for this service. Like they pay for the rocks being thrown in the sea. Would they be interested by what you are doing?
There are lots of so I think local government, cities is one fraction of the set of groups that would be interested in working with us. And I think the big problem that local governments have, or these cities, is just the budgets to do anything are just so small. So what I'm really hoping is that we can reduce the cost of throwing rocks in, or throwing oysters in, oysters attached to rocks or oysters attached to bricks, because we're able to spread the cost across multiple different industries, so you can have these public-private partnerships to build these projects. So if you look at, so there's something called, for example, the Thames Estuary 100 project, which is the river, the Thames that run through London. They're huge government tender that's going to come out in the next few years to regenerate the Thames Estuary in a nature inclusive manner to enhance all sorts of different things. So the challenge, the second challenge that we're in at the moment as well, and just I want to be really honest about it, is we are basing a lot of sales pitches and ideas on the idea that there is all this regulation coming to the future. There is all this sort of societal demand, and the movement to a sustainable ecology has to happen. And everyone's saying, okay, because it has to happen, let's start preparing now. And I think a great example of this is there's a regulation called biodiversity net gain in the UK, which means that any property development or real estate development has to be biodiversity neutral. So you have to regenerate your biodiversity if you cause any damage. Now, that was enforced last year, but the organizations which were exposed to this regulation have been implementing it for the last 6 years. They see it, you see it coming, and then you start preparing. Otherwise, if you're just trying to suddenly scrabble to work out your solutions, when the regulations hit, that's going to be very expensive, and you'll probably get fired as a CFO if you're surprised by something like that. So I think we're on this journey at the moment. We're not at this place where we're getting functional biodiversity markets, or you have the TNFDs, and EU nature restoration law is coming in 2027, and so there are all these things on the horizon. And what we need to be really careful about doing is just making sure that what we're doing ends up being accepted and understood by the regulation. And so there's this missing place. We're inching closer and closer, and we have to be telling very convincing narratives as to why we're in the right place and why we're doing the right thing. But I know that in the before 2030, or a lot of these things start to bite in 2027 and 2027 to 2030, that we'll have a bunch of case studies to show, yes, we are hitting the regulation the right way. We're reading the annexes of the EU nature restoration law to make sure that they're talking about oysters, that they make sure that they're talking about restoring juvenile fish nurseries, and make sure that they're talking about enhancing water quality. And then when we make our presentations, we say, these are the things in the annexes, it's coming, it's literally written down, and we can deal with this for you. But yeah, there's so much risk. There's so many things. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you are on the right path, because I forgot who told me this. In a previous interview, that regulators and lawmakers need two things. They need to see that they have the support of the people through petitions, etc., and data. And if they have both
Yeah.
to take a decision, some kind of a law or a regulation that is backed by science and supported by the people, that would be super easy to take. Obviously, if one of the two parameters is missing,
Yeah.
then it may take longer, or change
Yeah.
the form, etc. But to get back to the, let's say, the funding of your company and your activity, the growth, etc. Now that you know all what you know, that you have all what you have, if you could deliver a message to the you before Oyster Heaven, what would be this message?
Just be patient. I think I'm naturally an impatient person, and I feel like things should move as fast as me and as I want them to. And I have a sticky note which sits on my computer that just says patience. And I have colleagues now as well who, everything's going slower than they want it to. And I've learned that lesson already. And I was just talking to someone, I was just saying, just be patient. It's okay. It's going to happen. We're going in the right direction. And I wish I'd learned that sooner. I think as well, the other thing that would help a lot as well is this feeling of the downward pressure that an entrepreneur will feel never gets lighter. It's only going to increase the responsibility that you have, it just gets bigger. And no matter how many issues you're cutting away or dealing with, you're not gonna win. And the only thing that you can do is just let it slip off you a bit more easily. Try and have less friction with these problems. And so I think one of the key examples of this for me is, and I love all of my colleagues so much, and I care about them so much. And for a while last year, I was feeling the weight of every single one of their livelihoods on me, and being like, oh my God, not only my colleagues, but my clients trusting me, our subcontractors all trusting me. They all need to be paid. They've got families. Oh my God, this is so much pressure. But I think this realization that as long as you've been clear about what the situation is, everyone has made a decision to get onto this boat with you. They didn't have to. And just that realization that everyone who's making a bet with you, everyone that's saying, yeah, let's do this with oysters, as long as you've been clear at what the risks are, you've been realistic, and they've got, then it's their problem, and it's not my problem. And I just need to. My biggest problem is making sure that I'm having a nice time and I'm enjoying myself and that I can keep going. And I'm doing that with much greater ease this year than I was last year.
I totally feel you here, because people tend to think like, oh, if I reach X milestone, then it will
Yeah.
be easier. Like, oh, it's hard to begin with, and now I'm quite old man now. Like, I came to realize that, well, if you are really passionate about what you do, there is no real rest. You are always facing new challenges, etc. And you have, like,
Hmm.
it's whether you get retired, you sell your company, or you leave this planet. These are the
Hmm.
three.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you always have like new things to do, new challenges, etc. And last week we had this discussion with my co-founder, and he told me, like, you look so chill. Like, I don't know how you can handle this pressure. And I told him, well, that's
Yeah.
easy. Like, I have two principles. The first one problem at a time. The second, I have
Hmm.
this kind of philosophy. Like, it's a little bit morbid, but the biggest problem in life is death. And if you are dead, all your problems are solved. So why bother? Like, so that's how I'm so chill. But let's get back to your business and to your activity. Is it really specific to the North Sea, or is it replicable in other regions, and are you looking to expand to other regions?
Yeah, definitely. So oysters used to be everywhere, all around the world. In many places, they're not doing quite as badly as they were in the North, as they are in the North Sea. We've been exploiting them for a really long time. Um, at the moment, we've also got 3 demonstration projects going in the east coast of the US. So one in Florida, one in Maryland, and one in Long Island, New York State. And there's huge opportunity there for very, very similar reasons, particularly because of coastal erosion and sort of hurricane severe storms. I think that the angle there is much more about coastal stability than it is about the other kind of fractions of the issue. We're really interested as well in the Middle East. There used to be a lot of oysters there. There's a big ambition that's growing around environmental restoration, and they're quite well funded at the moment as well. So that's opportunity. And then the third future interesting area is probably Australia, Southeast Asia. Now, that's not to say that these are the places where we think that there is potential for revenue, but everything that we've designed should be replicable in incredibly generic circumstances. So we work with brick factories to produce our reef. They're installed by fishing vessels, and you just need to have oysters and a hatchery, and that can be developed relatively easily. And we're making these sort of mobile setups. So what we want is to be able to create a revenue from these regions so that we can then subsidize restoration happening in places maybe that can't afford to pay in the same way as maybe the US can, or the Middle East can. So places like the east coast of Africa or Latin America, but we can have all sorts of flexible ways of addressing these places without really having to change very much. But yeah, hopefully all over the place. And then, but what I really don't want to be doing is personally managing these projects. What I think is the best way to do this is just putting the technology, the tools, the blueprints into the hands of people that know how to do it. And as long as we can afford to do that, we will do that. My business is a for-profit business, not because we're looking to enrich ourselves, but because this allows us to then, one, be investable, but then two, fund and invest in other interesting things that can help in a bigger way.
Yes, and at the end, you need cash to fuel your activity and do good on the planet. So it's common sense. And I had the question even before we started the interview. I had the question regarding how the pricing of oysters impact their fishing. Well, I don't know if we consider grabbing oysters like as fishing. Is it fishing?
Yeah. I think people call it fishing. Yeah.
It's like highly unfair fishing. Like,
Yeah.
but what's the correlation? Is it like, oh, because they are more expensive than other species, they are less targeted, or is it the opposite? They are more targeted than others because they are more expensive, just like lobsters in the East Coast region of the US.
I think the vast majority of oysters that you would eat now in Northern Europe are farmed. So they are grown from larvae in a hatchery and then they're put out into the water to grow to maturity. And this is one because there aren't so many oysters left to wild catch and they're a protected species now. So native oysters, you can still, there's an invasive type of species called the Japanese oyster, the Pacific oyster, which you can fish and you can take out the water. But the other problem is if you want an oyster which is market ready, which is looks good on a plate, pulling it off a rock, you're not getting that nice shape. So you don't want them all in clumps, and so you have to keep them all moving and growing at the right kinds of rates, and you grade them. So there's a big process that's behind them now. But this is not to say I this question often gets asked, and people ask me, is it okay to eat oysters? In Europe, yes, it's totally okay to eat oysters. I encourage people to eat oysters. But every oyster in the water is a net positive. The more demand for oysters, people aren't going to go back to wild catching them because they are not available. But more farmed oysters is a good thing. We should be getting more of our protein from shellfish because they help the environment, unlike a cow, which under many circumstances is not a net positive for the environment. In the US, people are still doing wild catch, and in many other places in the world. But yeah, so this advice probably makes most sense for Northern Europe. But and one more thing that I might add on that as well is about the value of an oyster. So one of my big dreams and part of this sort of weird mathematics of this is at one point it will be more valuable to leave an oyster in the water than to sell it for food. And if you're looking at the wholesale price of an oyster as being 50 cents or €1, then you're measuring up the value that it's doing in terms of a water filtration device and reef builder. We're already at this point where a single oyster is worth more left in the water than being sold to eat theoretically, and then practically, hopefully, with these first commercial transactions, will be showing that it is genuinely more valuable in the right circumstances to leave in.
Oh yeah, I do believe that you can get to this point, especially if they filter 200 liters of water a day. Is it a day or per month?
No, per day. Yeah.
Yeah, if you need to do it with like pumps and filters, etc., well, it would cost you more than the price of one oyster.
Yeah. But it does. I think that's when I said at the beginning, there are technical solutions as well as natural solutions. Our synthetic solutions are very good at getting rid of like the first 80-90% of pollution. It's that last 10%, which is still a problem, which is really difficult for a water filtration sewage treatment facility to deal with. But oysters are really good at dealing with this. So what you want to do is you want to layer in your natural systems with your synthetic solutions to get the most economically optimal outcomes.
One of the reasons behind this podcast, Ecosystemic, because obviously it's not our core business, and I do it pretty much for fun. We realized over time, talking to many founders, that we had for 200 years built our technological development at the expense of nature. And every time, like every 50-year cycle, we realize, the impact of our innovation. And we try to correct it with like duct tape, etc., etc., etc. But now, every time we talk to a young founder, we realize that now people have both the technical capabilities, but also this kind of, it's in their DNA to take in consideration what's the future impact of their business on the planet and adapt and correct. And regarding yours, it's obvious what's the net benefit of your activity on the planet. But let's play the devil's advocate. What would be the effect of your business working too well and oysters proliferating all over the planet? And as you mentioned, we eat farmed oysters, so they don't really fear us.
Yeah.
And what would be the outcome? How to prevent this?
Yeah. Well, I think we are generations and generations away from restoring the amount of oysters that they used to be. But I would say that if so, forgetting that, and we'll just say yes, we get to this point where there is this population explosion, and they're just absolutely everywhere. You're talking about a species, a species that's become excessively successful at exploiting a certain niche because maybe there aren't any. I don't know what's going on. Something can't eat it. There's a really good analogy, or not analogy, but a case study of something like this happening, which people freaked out about for a while, and people are still probably freaking out about it. But I think there is something in this that shows the point that I'm going to try and make. So that's the cane toad in Australia, which was an invasive species which reached Australia, and it's incredibly poisonous. And there are just like billions and billions of them now. They've completely taken over, and it has no natural predator. So this is the kind of scenario. Suddenly, oysters, there are loads and loads of oysters. There are way too many of them. But then this very interesting thing happened. There's a kind of bird in Australia called the ibis, which is a pretty common bird. And people spotted this group of ibises picking up these cane toads, smacking them around a bit, wiping them on grass, dipping them in water, smacking them around a bit more, and then just swallowing them whole. And then this behavior, they noticed, so it was able to eat it, and then this behavior started getting transmitted between different populations of ibises. Because what happens is, if there's an organism which is suddenly able to exploit a source of calories that nothing else can exploit, it becomes immediately very, very successful, and it has more children, and the behavior spreads. And so suddenly it kind of evens out. And this is the same thing that you see repeatedly happening in ecology, where a new species enters a new area. It has a niche that it does really well in, and nothing can deal with it. But then, if it does too well, there's this natural force that will come in and say, "Oh, now this other predator of it is going to start doing really well, and it's going to start eating all of them." And then something else will do really well by eating that. And then at some point, this sort of food web evens itself out. And maybe humans are part of that food web. So suddenly we've got billions of oysters, trillions of oysters. We can start eating more oysters, or our pets can start eating more oysters. But I would say that it would be very strange if something as delicious as an oyster reached a point where there were too many of them to eat. And I'd like to think we should have solved sort of global hunger before that point. But yeah, I'm glad that I got to talk about the cane toads, because I like that, and I think people get very freaked out by invasive species. I think species look invasive just in our lifetimes, and then they become endemic, and then everything flattens out eventually. Everything moves around. I'm far less worried about invasive species and dramatic changes in population than I used to be, when you look at things on a sort of thousands of years, millions of years scale.
As you mentioned rightfully, species are invasive in two ways. They are invasive because of our intervention, or
Go on.
from our perspective. Like
Yeah.
if we didn't do it, they are invasive for us.
Yeah.
and pretty often they are invasive because we tweaked with the
Yeah.
natural order of things somehow.
You could just look at it in a different way. You could say, actually, the Pacific oyster, which has managed to get to Europe, very clever, stuck itself to the bottom of a boat, and then not flew over, but like rowed over to the North Sea and started doing very well. Clever Pacific oyster for making use of the commercial shipping routes.
Exactly. So we did it. So we brought them here. Look, man, like we've been talking, like frankly speaking, I was not expecting to get like an hour and a half talking about oysters, and that's what I love about this podcast. I'm always amazed. I'm like a kid. I open a new chapter and I discover a whole new world. But that was really a pleasure to meet you and to see what you're doing, etc. One final world. No, before the final world. Word, not world. That's another issue. What's the current need of your business? What are you looking for? Are you looking for more investors for your current round? More partners? Expand to new more countries? What's your immediate needs, and how do people can find you if they have exactly what you're looking for?
So go to our website, www.oysterheaven.org, and follow us on LinkedIn. You can get hold of me on george@oysterheaven.org. I think I'm always happy to speak to everyone. And I think a good part of design thinking is speaking to as many different people from as many different backgrounds, whether it's lawyers or artists or musicians or architects. Everyone will have a different opinion and a different take, and some of it's good and some of it's we've already thought of, but it's amazing either way. So I always welcome these conversations. And the things that we're looking for at the moment, in terms of the funding, I think we're okay for the moment. So, but if for future rounds, if you're looking at large scale debt investment into Oyster Reef, then let's start that conversation now, because it'll take a few years before we can actually build that security properly. I think if you are an organization, we're feeling a bit exposed, worried about your ingredients, worried about your social license to operate. You've heard the spiel already. We'd love to talk to you. And I think maybe the most interesting thing at the moment is we're going to be running more projects. And there's a very special type of individual that we're looking to maybe hire. And some roles are going to come out in the next few months, looking particularly at people who can first support the projects which we're already running, and then go on to be project leads and running their own projects. And doing this, it is not for the faint-hearted. You have to be so entrepreneurial. There are so many different pieces of this. Managing relationships with clients, with brick manufacturers, with fishers, with the local harbour authority, but it is for the people who are doing well at the moment. And we've had some of my colleagues who just have come out of nowhere and have just become exceptional at this. So there's a good bunch of people that have already done this before. Yeah, we're looking for new people to do this with, particularly in the Netherlands at the moment, but potentially also in the UK. So yeah.
Perfect. And I assume you will post something on LinkedIn so people may follow your LinkedIn page so they can get the notification. Perfect. And what's your final word before we call it a day? Because this episode is great and I can't wait to start editing, etc. But what would be the final piece of advice you would give to people that are pursuing the same path as you, not deploying oyster reefs, of course, but working hard to make our planet better?
I think I'm going to repeat something which I just repeat to everyone. And there are a few people that come to me with some sort of business idea. Now, I am not the arbiter of is a business going to work or not. But I did an MBA, and if I learned one thing on this MBA, and hopefully I learned more than that, but there's one thing that particularly sticks with you is focus on a problem. And everyone knows this. Everyone knows this. You will be repeated. Find a problem and find the best way to solve that problem. That's how you make a business in this system. It is amazing. It's amazing how many people kid themselves and fool themselves into thinking that they've done this. Because what normally happens is they kind of like something a bit, and then they try and find some sort of thing that they can fix with the thing that they like. And this is a big problem, and this is a big problem which is enhanced by a certain type of circular businesses with circular products, where they say, okay, we've got this waste stream, let's turn it into something that can fix something else. The problem with that is very often the thing that you've made with your waste stream, yeah, you've got a free product. You've got some sort of free clothing dye from fungus or something. And you say, right, it's free, so that's better. But unless there's a business that wants a dye which is going to fade faster, which is very often the case, okay, then you're going to have a really hard time selling it, because they're just selling things to their customers, and their customers want clothing which is going to stay looking a certain color for the majority of cases. So this idea that your waste stream is going to get you into something good, maybe that works, but very often that's the wrong way to start around. We use a waste stream. Well, we want to use a waste stream. So our reefs are made from clay, and we hope that dredge material will eventually be a bigger and bigger part of the ingredients that go into the clay. That is a sort of, once we'd already settled on a manufacturing process and all that, then we start using the waste material. So I can give one anecdote about this, and this will take 2 minutes, and I hope that's okay. But it illustrates this perfectly. And I had a few ideas before I went and joined this MBA that I did at Rotterdam. And I was like, I'm going to go start one of these businesses. And I'd heard from someone that air quality in offices, if you get too much carbon dioxide, people's brains start performing worse. And, not even a lot of carbon dioxide, you get like a 5% decrease in cognitive function. I thought, oh my God, okay, wow, that's really exciting. What sort of sorts out air quality of plants, and people like plants in offices, and so. But what's the big problem with people keeping plants in offices? It's that they don't take care of them well. So maybe if I create these sort of modular trenches, and you put your plants in, and they've got the water and they've got the food already in it, and you can they're like Lego, and you can just bring them in and out, and you sell them as a service. And what you do is you go to the CEO of your company and you say, okay, how much would you pay so that all of your employees are performing 5% better? They're 5% more cognitively there. And there's this fundamental flaw. A lot of people go like, oh, that's very interesting. That's a very interesting business idea. But there's a fundamental flaw in this. And very few people, I'm not even sure if anyone's, or maybe a couple of people, have realized what the fundamental flaw is. Can you guess what the fundamental flaw is?
Oh, regarding this business model of well, I would say there is no first, there is no direct causality between the plants and the 5% claim of
Separate problem. I think that is if you got it right, it's theoretically possible. It's theoretically possible to put enough plants in an office to solve an air quality issue. The science is there. The fundamental problem is, are plants the best way to solve an air quality issue in an office? No, opening the window is. Okay? So you've got any good investor will say, yeah, okay, air quality is a real issue. Now, what is the best way to solve this? What are the competing pathways to resolving this issue? I just want to work with plants because I quite like plants. And you end up in this thing where you construct this reverse narrative into something that feels like it might be a good business idea, But when you get to the reality of trying to sell it to a customer or like sell it to an investor, things will get really hard. And they say, 9 out of 10 businesses fail or ventures fail. I don't think that that's true. I don't think that 9 out of 10 good ideas fail. I think that there are a lot of ideas which are not bad ideas. They're just constructed in the wrong way, and they don't make it to the reality of our capitalist system. So I think my final bit of advice for anyone out there, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is start with a problem and be brutal about whether you have actually started with a problem or you've started with the solution and you're trying to find a problem to solve with it.
Amen to that. And I would add also, like, find other people than you and your close ones
Yeah.
having this problem. I face this kind of situation where people tell me, oh yeah, but I did my market research, I interviewed my 10 friends, and they all say they would buy my product.
Yeah. Is it a problem as well? That's another big one. Find a problem, find a real problem, and find the best solution. I should make that more clear.
And then you have a profitable business.
Or one that has a much better chance of being a profitable business.
To survive.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, that was like an amazing. Go ahead. Sorry for interrupting.
Keep
on. There is no hard stop. We can keep on talking.
No. I was just going to say, like, the MBA that I did. It took a year of my life. It was quite expensive to do, but it has saved me so much time because maybe I pursued one of these businesses which were flawed. And so I'm trying to give you the download of my MBA. And if you can truly understand this one thing, then you probably don't need to do an MBA. Or at least, it took me a year to learn that.
to get back to the air quality, one of the first episodes we did, I will share it with you after. It's about air quality.
Okay.
And true, like I was surprised because founder Saketaram, he runs a startup focusing on indoor air quality. And he told me, like, for the European indoor air quality is 8 times worse than the outdoor air quality.
Yeah.
And like, and in this 1 hour, like, he told me so many things. For example, like the number one reason, cleaning stuff, like cleaning materials, all the fragrance that we put everywhere, from the floor to the clothes to the curtain to etc. The number 2 is the glue that we have in our furnitures. The glue in the brand new furnitures releases like chemical components for 3 years. So buying an old furniture after 3 years prevents you from having pollution indoor. And as you said, like, when I asked me, like, okay, what's the best way? Like, do I need to install, like, filters, put fans, etc. for cooling? He told me, no, just like open the window 20 minutes a day in the morning, and that's it.
Yeah. I'm sure that there is some business model there, and there is something exciting. It's just it doesn't involve plants. It doesn't involve nature. And I wanted to be involved with nature. And so I found a nature problem that can be solved with nature.
Yeah, it could be like an Uber you pay people to come at your house.
Open your window. Yeah, exactly. Funny.
George, thanks a lot. I think we would have more episodes. I'm starting to get some episodes on marine and ocean conservation. Like, you are the second in this series, but strangely, I didn't plan it, but the most interesting topics that came on our pipeline were like about ocean and marine conservation, etc. So maybe we will create like a private club of like, the ocean superheroes or something like this.
Please, I'd love that. Connect me.
See you soon, man.
Thank you very much.
That's it for today. I hope that you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed making it. Ecosystemic is available on all major platforms: YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, and pretty much everywhere. Please support us by subscribing, sharing with people. We try to bring in the show the best guests, providing unbiased and honest feedback about these issues. Don't forget, if you want to take a step further and support us, support Zero. Go to nomorezero.com and get yours. It's not only a portable battery, it's a movement. And to get more fun, join the community.lepo.tech, where you will meet passionate people just like you, building together from initiatives to open source projects to supporting our actions. And for that, I can't thank you enough. Until the next episode, see you soon. Bye-bye.